think y'all know that was MLK Jr. that he's singing about. This is Gregory Porter, and I thought it'd be a cool song to start off this series. I do not own the right to this music, but I think this song is a very relevant piece of music to hear in relationship to what I'm about to share with you. I'm going to turn it off now. So my name is Wanda Lee Florestine, and I am an author of the book 50 Years of Assimilation, from the Midwest to the Woke West, and all the blackness and whiteness in between. And today is August 1st, 2026. And as an African American citizen of America, 6 generations in that I can currently record and count back, we're fighting for our voting rights again. There is a march that will be happening on the anniversary of the first march, which was August 28th in 1963, the year of my birth. The march on this August 28th is 63 years after that initial march for voting rights and civil rights. At that time led by Martin Luther King Jr., and this time it's going to be led by the NAN organization, which stands for the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Martin Luther King III, and other civil rights leaders and activists. And so that's happening this August 28th, 2026. So I am an author, and I thought it'd be interesting to read chapters from my book from today until the 28th in solidarity with that march, to express what I can in ways to help bridge the gap. It's amazing that we're still in this conversation in the 21st century, that my birthright is being snatched away. How else to say it? For a myriad of reasons. The first one being an African American. The second one is being a female who was married and has a name change. So I may have to even defend my voting rights because my birth certificate and my current name, Wanda Lee Florestine, does not match my birth certificate. So in honor of that march and in solidarity with that march, I wanted to share my book for whatever it does to the populace to help us bridge this racial gap that we seem to be so addicted to having. This is one of the things that I feel like is necessary. Maybe it provides a level of social understanding that others can't see right now. Maybe it allows conversations to happen between people that normally wouldn't talk to each other. I actually don't know the answer to this disease that we've been plagued with for centuries. But any and all things that I can do, I'm willing to at least try. So that is what I'm bringing to you today. So I'm going to share with you my book, 50 Years of Assimilation, from the Midwest to the Woke West, and all the blackness and whiteness in between. Again, my name is Wanda Lee Florestine, and I'm just going to start reading sections per day. So what I will tell you about the book is that this was my dream report to Dr. King. I wrote this book because I hadn't found any books that shared about the first generation, which is me, to inherit Dr. King's dream, his dream of integration. And for me, it turned into assimilation, and for other African American people, because we had to, go out and assimilate into the dominant culture, or integrate into the dominant culture, and it turned out to be an assimilation because we basically had to leave the blackest parts of ourselves at home in order to fit in, get in where we could. And so we did that, but it's still not enough, obviously, for some powers that be that are still trying to roll back the tape and let's start all over again in the 60s or even before that into Jim Crow or slavery. I don't know what the plan is. The 2025, Project 2025, I know what that plan is, but it is it doesn't sit well with my humanity. My people have been here for centuries, and I am America. I am America. I am America. As much as I am African American, as much as I am, Native American, actually, in my DNA. So, this book again is my dream report to Dr. King to share with him how his dream played out in my life. Writing the book about the first generation of quote unquote free African Americans post civil rights, to just kind of share decade by decade how I got in and fit in and tried to live my version of the American dream. And so the first thing I'll read is that the dedication, and it is my ancestors and my posterity. You were here, I am here now, and you are coming. Ashe. That's my dedication. And then I have a note from the author, myself. And that note says, a very beautiful and wise woman, Josie B. Cummings from Los Angeles, California, expressed an adage to me in a very loving and wishful way. She said, quote unquote, books can travel places you can't. In the spirit of that adage, which I received wholeheartedly, I hope this book will not only travel places that I can't, but it will take me to places I've never been. May it also be an instrument for open, honest, and healing racial conversations. I really mean that. And so I'll just share the content so that you kind of get a sense of the sections of the book. So the preface is first, and then the introduction after that. And then the first section is called The Capture, and it's the 1960s. And then the second section is called The Seasoning, and it's the 1970s. The third section is called The Labor, and that's the 1980s. The Emancipation, the 1990s. Liberation, the 2000s. Freedom, and that's with a question mark, and it's 2010s. And then the last section is What's the Future? Question mark. So I structured it, if you recognize that those stages, that structure is actually kind of also the history of our being brought to this continent, with the capture, the seasoning, the labor, emancipation, the liberation, the freedom, and then what's the future. And in my particular lifespan so far, these all relate to the decades as well, to my actual growth. So it was an interesting parallel that works really well for the framing of the book. So I'm just going to read the preface today, and then I'm going to read the introduction. And the preface is a couple of pages, and the introduction has 3 semi-chapters in it. Episode 1, which is psychological. Episode 2, which I note as cultural. And then episode 3 is societal. So that's all I'm going to read tonight. Thank you for your time and interest. And here we go, starting with the preface. Not long ago, I was talking with my cousin. I call her cousin Mama, but she's better known as E to those near and dear, letter E. She is 20 years older and babysat me while my mother was recovering from my C-section birth. E and I often reminisce about the olden days. She shares stories of my family and fills in the blanks about my parents. I lost them both by age 15. Today, E is 79, and we live thousands of miles apart. But we never go more than a month without a long phone call. We talk about the family history, our stolen oil and timberland in Alabama, marriage and divorce, death and taxes, drugs, sex, politics, and race. Racism is the subtext of everything. We do not get to escape it. For us, The world is black and white still, and we are really tired of it. She listens while I lament. I listen while she laments. We're busy solving racial matters in America. We bemoan the emotional labor of having to consistently and persistently defend our humanity. And I spell humanity Huemanity. I spell humanity with the E because it feels more inclusive. On this particular day, E got a bit maudlin and started apologizing. I was surprised. For what? For dropping the ball, she said. At first, I didn't get it, but I knew I'd better listen. She said, it makes sense when she told me that in the 50s, when they were fighting for the right to integrate, they had settled in some ways. Her generation was so happy to finally gain employment beyond domestics, janitorial, and kitchen staff that they went along to get along. The auto industry looked like it provided a pathway to the middle class, and they wanted, like every other American, to roll right on in. They stood to get cars, homes, and a slice of the American pie, as long as they stayed in their lane. Because they wanted the promise of the American dream, they kept low profiles, believing it guaranteed long-term employment and some of the cushy comforts. So they took one for the team when they were marginalized, made fun of, ignored, tolerated, used, and called the N-word. Black people went along with this, with the understood racial social contract. They accepted the schisms, that the speed of the auto engines was in sharp contrast to the dragging pace of integration. Ironically, integration brought about the dissembling of the Black community. The lure and the invitation to get in and fit in quickly turned into every man and woman for themselves for many families. I recognized the truth of what E said. I knew the depth of her integrity, her confession, and had her confession, had a profound and saddening effect on me. I still think about the phone call. The generational legacy of slavery and Jim Crow was a cultural and psychological disorder for Blacks and whites. For whites, it manifested in the inordinate need to be in control, in charge, a continuum of the myth of supremacy. For Blacks, it manifested in the inordinate need to be accepted, to be liked long before Facebook and Instagram, and by almost any means necessary. Even worse, it presented a fallacy, that of our complete acceptance and full citizenry. So yes, integration became the law of the land, but the lay of the land was assimilation. Most of us kept the blackest parts of ourselves at home, code switching and bringing just the whites-only norm out in public. The proverbial shotgun wedding of Black and white people was official. There was no honeymoon because there was no real love. It was a union of fear and disdain that evolved only to situational tolerance. People of my generation and younger could easily view the American Black experience E&I and my parents lived through as selling out. But as I reflect now, it does beg the question: how can we judge them having not gone through the persistent overt levels of racism they endured for decades? Hanging was not a crime. We stood and still stand on their shoulders and yet have not had to walk in their shoes because we were lifted up by them. Our view was much different. It is easy to say we would have done it differently. It is easy to say what I often hear behind closed doors: I wish a whitey would, fill in the blank. But we were not there. We weren't. My book is a letter to an African American hero. Without any disrespect, I wish to tell Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. how the dream played out in my life, how the dream was riddled with nightmares. Dr. King saw what should be, but he did not see what would be. I wrote this book also because you should hear from me. You should hear the narrative of post-civil rights America from a Black American woman. I urge you, without guilt or victimhood, to get up close and personal, to learn intimately how racism lives. You'll get a chance to walk in my shoes. And that's the preface. So again, the introduction has 3 phases, episode 1, 2, and 3. And the first episode is subtitled Psychological. Shabbat Shalom, peace on the Sabbath. In 2013, I attended the bat mitzvah of my then 13-year-old daughter's classmate. This was the first time we visited a synagogue. We arrived in the parking lot just as the host family did. I was relieved to have met them first, and that the parents appeared to be the same age or slightly older than me at that time, age 50. The family quickly walked through the foyer to prepare for their guests, leaving us behind with the older greeters holding boxes of lapis-colored felt yarmulkes. One of them began to explain what we should do after asking if we had ever visited a synagogue before. As we entered the sanctuary, I was glad we arrived right on time. A minor feat for me. I'm not sure why I am so typically late. I do believe I have an inherited predisposition, and I am sure in my family's case, it has something to do with taking risks. We are gamblers, but I was determined that we would not be the late Black people to this event. CP stands for colored people. Time is reserved for CP events. We were given the Jewish Bible, Torah, and the Hebrew prayer book. The service program seemed logical enough, listing the order of rituals, the names of acknowledged congregants, future events, and prayer requests for the ill and unattended. It was simple in design and different than what I was used to, functional yet assuming. The ambiance of the sanctuary was also unassertive. I think I imagined a more mystic quality. I guess I expected a very sacred and ancient biblical walk on water kind of feeling, even though Jesus would not be a part of the service. Aside from the mysterious shrine, which I later learned was housing the Ark and protecting the Torah scrolls on tall, ornate brass rods, everything else felt austere and unemotional. The seating faced east in 3 sections, leaving 2 aisles. Instead of pews, there were broad-backed maple chairs, softened by blue woven upholstered cushions with book cubbies underneath, arranged to form a semicircle. We sat midway on the left section. I, one away from the aisle seat, was close enough to escape, but not obviously so. My daughter sat in the row in front of me with 3 schoolmates she recognized. The room began to fill in gradually. We did not know the service was going to be 3 hours long. Of course, I noticed, as I always do, after my cultural auto scan and calculation, that we were the only Black folks out of 80 or so congregants. For the next half hour, others trickled in. A woman came to my aisle. I uncrossed my legs and made room for her to pass without looking up. She sat on the seat next to the one occupied by my purse on the right. I looked over to do the Christian thing. I'm sure Jewish people do this too. And say hello. Lost my place, hold on. and say hello. Oh, good. Sorry. And say hello. And saw that she was black too. Sorry about that. She did not return my Judeo Christian gesture, so I said nothing. I actually got annoyed. Not because she didn't acknowledge me, which would have been reason enough, especially because we were in a house of prayer, but she chose to locate herself next to me. I didn't know her from Adam, yet she chose to avoid all of the other empty seats, roughly 100, and plop right down in my black only, sanctified, sacrificial space. So, what was wrong with that, you ask? What was wrong is that her presence put me back in my head. At that very moment, I was coming out of my program cultural world. She instantly took that away from me, the status, and I use this word facetiously, of being the only black woman there. She turned my soon to be out of my head experience of being present, of me trying to just be human, sharing an intimate experience of newness and religious ceremony, into me being incessantly in my head and now sitting in the black section. I am sure God was using this as a teaching moment, but I was not being a good student. I wanted to douse her with dark spot corrector and make her disappear. My presumed mysterious and distinguished solitary attendance, I felt, had been washed away, and I had become they or them. So I obsessed most of the rest of the service. 2 more long, arduous hours, about what others were thinking of our invasion of their space. Were we welcomed? Did they think we were together, related? Did they want to engage, or did they think less of us? Did they wonder if we came out of curiosity or as spies? Were we a threat? Did they wish we were gone? I tried hard to focus on the ceremony, the rabbi, the readings, my daughter's friend, the Torah procession, the sweet life candy throw, cute, and I must use that somewhere. The singing, the prayers. But my peripheral view kept pulling me back inside that dangerous headspace of mine. That space is colorful, not colorblind. That space that relentlessly undermines my ability to be just human. The space that has pretty much kept my freedom at bay. It is silent, yet deafening, and it invades continuously. It is always chattering about what is not proper and right and good and mainstream and yes, more white. More USDA stamped approved. It steals my grace. It steals my peace. And it is difficult as hell to shut down. When the last prayer was said and the service ended, I went immediately outside to get some fresh air, to clear my head. On my way back, I ran into Noah, a coworker who had helped me out at work on more than one occasion. He had just arrived. He seemed genuinely happy to see me. His presence momentarily silenced my insanity. He told me that he was late, and mainly there to pick up his girlfriend who helped to facilitate the event. I explained my attendance, but he had already guessed, knowing I have a teenage daughter. We chatted about work and the synagogue. He joked that he was on JP time, Jewish people. I never heard that before. He also admitted he rarely comes for the full length of the service. Shortly afterwards, he excused himself to find his girlfriend. I went back in for the Kiddush. I like the sound of that word. I hope I said it right. And while I was waiting in line at the buffet table, I no longer saw the other woman. I was relieved to regain my assumed status and simultaneously wondered how long I would be under this black plague. Where is my freedom here on earth? Why is this simple freedom so elusive? I did not see my daughter, so I got in line to fill my plate. I later saw her at a table nearby with her friend and classmates looking right at home. I wondered how much I had already poisoned her with this infectious, dis-ease state of constipated, hyperracial mindfulness, and then took pleasure in the visual harmonious symphony of sisterhood at their table. I sat with the host family's cousin from New York. They signaled an invitation, and I spent the next hour embellishing them with my brilliance while annoying the heck out of a younger 20-something male cousin. He was put out by my directness toward him. I do not recall what my inquisition was about, but I told him because of my brashness, I was sure he'd never forget me. This remedied my earlier emotional upset. Thank you, Jewish cousin. I needed you. And this event, rather my behavior, was proof that I had not yet evolved. My freedom was, and sometimes still is, smothered under persistent generational, internal, oppressive, repressive dialogues. And that was episode 1, psychological. So now I'm going to read episode 2, cultural. I crashed a party given by my friend who is an education administrator. She and her family were hosting relatives, and I happened to call fishing for some place to go. They asked us over to play some games. My family was more than happy to oblige. There was a discussion that caused me some grief. My friend had taken undergrad courses with emphasis in African history. She has always been an in-your-face, don't mess with me, I know my history African American. She declared that a game she wanted to play called 10,000 was not a legitimate game. Wow. I was shocked that those words came out of her mouth. She meant legitimate in the sense of known by mainstream, white stream, commercialized, packaged, distributed, and sold to the masses. Excuse me. I was a bit hurt. Really? Did you just say legitimate? I knew what she meant and was not so shocked that she meant it, but shocked that she meant it. You see, I thought with all of her research, education, training, and cultural fortitude that she had actually achieved a reprogramming of the socialized cultural subthinking we learn at a very early age. That sense of outside validation from things we create to only be legit if someone else, someone white, says so. Why does a game need legitimizing? It's play, and play is play. She caught my drift, owned up to her slip, and agreed that if we're having fun, it's legit. But she lost me at illegitimate, and I was secretly saddened she had not fully evolved yet either. She was, after all, a Gen Xer, and I thought they were more militant-minded than us boomers. And if she had not escaped the sub-thinking cultural programming with her undergrad ethnic studies degree and her graduate degree from UC Berkeley, then the rest of us did not have a prayer. And that's cultural for episode 2. Episode 3, societal. I would be remiss not to mention the very tragic and unnecessary deaths of Trayvon Martin, 2013, Michael Brown, 2014, Eric Gardner, 2014, Tamir Rice, 2014, Sandra Bland, 2015, Philandro Castile, 2017, Ahmaud Arbery, 2020, Breonna Taylor, 2020, and George Floyd, 2020, and too many more not recorded or as polarizing, too painfully named. This was written prior to 2025, obviously, in 2026. These young men and women were killed for menial acts of disobedience, or none, and did not deserve to die, period. Each of their aggressors used their assumed and or lawful authority to take those lives because of their racism. We Black folks, particularly our young men, are still feared, vilified, and marginalized on a daily basis, and it happens more times than we hear about nationally. But this has got to stop. Black skin is not a weapon. I'm going to say that again. Black skin is not a weapon. The not guilty verdict for Trayvon Martin's murder was the verdict that spawned me into social activism. And despite the 2022 guilty verdicts of Floyd's and Arbery's murderers, the overwhelming lack of accountability or murder charges for all of these race-based and reckless murders feels like the clock was dialed back over 50 years. 50 plus years ago, when the JC, Jim Crow, laws ruled the land in the name of the original GC, Jesus the Christ. That historical use of Christianity to justify slavery and its subsequent iterations. Those Jim Crow laws that made Black injustice legally and socially acceptable. Before the protests, before the sit-ins, before the boycotts, before the marches, before the I Have a Dream speech. Before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And now, 50 plus years later, here we are again, marching and protesting still to gain true justice, voting rights, equality, and equal treatment under the law in our post-racial society. I have a Native son, and he's a wonderful young African-American alpha male. When in this country, his country, my country, and quite possibly the world, will Black boys and Black men gain their God-given basic male human right to be impulsively expressive and inappropriately innocent without the fear of being killed? When will they/we be truly free? So, Dr. King, I have to say, desegregation essentially meant assimilation. And I'm going to assert that this is not what you really wanted. But because it was your dream that we inherited, I'm sharing with you how the dream thus far has played out in my life. Because as of 2022, we are still wanting to know what real freedom truly looks like. And that's the end of episode 3. And obviously it said at the end of 2022, and here we are 4 years later, and it feels like nothing's moved. It's actually gotten worse because of the attacks of others as well. So I hope you enjoyed that reading. I'm going to save my commentary for another time because it's late. And I will read chapter or chapters daily to get through the entire book by the 28th of August. I'm, interested in having a conversation, not an attack. So if you're prone to attack, I'm just going to need to ignore it because I don't want to sink to that level. I do believe my humanity is just as valid as the next person. We all came through the same way. The birthplace of civilization is in a continent called Africa. Mitochondria or Eve was found in Africa. And so at some point, I really pray that we can find our common humanity and stop living inside these destructive chapters of human history and just really honor and recognize and see ourselves and others and let go this vicious cycle of racism. All right, more tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Wanda Lee Florestine out.